Thanks a lot, everybody, for joining. Our focus today is going to be to talk about workflows, and in particular, the workflows which are related to the request approval functionality within OpenIAM. So we're going to follow the same format that we always do on these calls. We're going to go over the background to what request approval, functionality really is about, how we can configure it, and then we'll be going through the live setup of setting it up. Okay. So just to take a step back, we when we talk about the workflows, there are several types of workflows which are built into OpenIAM as a default offering. These workflows related to, say, like the new hire process, to position changes, to terminations. They're there for self-registration, and they're obviously there for request approval and for access certification as well. So in pretty much all of these cases, the workflows which are there out of the box, they a couple of things worth noting is that they're basically they're abstracted away from the core product, right? So there's a workflow engine which we use, which is it's I believe it's called it's called Activity is the workflow engine that we're using. And all the workflows themselves are represented in XML files in a BPM and then notation. Okay. And so you can work with the actual workflow files. You can bring it into a Eclipse designer. You can modify there, or if you're comfortable, you can just process the XML files there. Okay, there's a bunch of questions coming up. One of them has to do with somebody's asking about where we can find the previous recordings. That there's a YouTube channel for OpenIAM, which has a playlist, which all of these are there, and there's an email notification that's been going on after each one of these sessions. So if you haven't received it, we'll take a look afterwards, and we'll make sure that your name is on there. Also, the link to the playlist has already been shared. You can view it there. Okay. Somebody else is asking. I just wanted to ask, since I'm very new, wanted to ask, when connecting to AD to OpenIAM, is in the AD connector, when we put the RabbitMQ host IP, that IP is the host, is the IP of the host machine, or is it the OpenIAM? Okay, so this was a session that we did, probably the second session that we did. I think that's what this question goes back to. So when you're setting up the Active Directory connector, the IP address that you're putting in on the connector side, it refers to where RabbitMQ is installed. And so in most cases, RabbitMQ is going to be installed on the OpenIAM side of the Linux box. And the reason that I say most of the time is because it is possible to separate out the RabbitMQ component into its own separate server or a cluster and have things point to that, right? But so in typical deployments, you'll be pointing back to the IP address of your OpenIAM instance. Okay, so going back to our workflows. So like I said, you can work with those files. You can edit the XML files both in a designer or directly in a text editor. From there, you can define the steps that the workflow should take. You can make calls to Groovy scripts or introduce the logic there. So it's fairly flexible, but given that one of the patterns that we see with most customers is that they want the flexibility to be able to customize the workflows, but really nobody wants to do it, right? Everybody wants to be able to do something simple and fast. And so what we did was we basically have the abstraction of the workflow engine where we can do this, but a lot of the common workflows you can configure right from the UI. And there's some basic things that we can do. So in that respect, virtually all the workflows which are there are all multi-approver. So you can define n level of steps to, in your approval process. Most of the workflows, for example, things that require any kind of approval, they also have an escalation capability in them and an SLA capability. So you can say, well, something has to be done in a certain amount of time, and then after that, you can send a reminder, right? So all of those things are true of the request approval functionality. So now kind of focusing in a little bit on the request approval functionality. The idea here is that we have two types of ways that people can get access. One is your automated user lifecycle management, the joiners, movers, leavers processes, right, and the burst right rules that go with them. And the other is a request approval model where somebody can go in and they can request access, right? So they can go to the self-service portal. There's a catalog there where you can pick and choose the things that you want access to. If it's a sensitive item, it may go to someone else to have it approved. And if they do, then we can automatically create that, right? There's a third option also, which is where an admin or some authorized user can just give you a permission, right? But usually we try to do most of the work through the first two scenarios. Okay. And so the question is, why do we have this capability? And the main reason why this is there is twofold. One is we want to really be able to empower users to do as much of this work as they possibly can. So kind of shift the burden of granting or access and processing it from the help desk to the end user, and especially if we have connectors for these applications, even the fulfillment of that request can be automatically done. So we want to be able to kind of spread out the workload a little bit, let the people who are closest to a certain task be able to handle their own requests. The other part is to have traceability for compliance in terms of knowing why someone has access to a certain group membership or a certain permission, right? And so if we know who requested it, who approved it, and when it was actually granted, then we have some fundamental information that we can give to the auditors to justify how someone gained a certain level of access, right? Also, as we go through this, you'll notice that there's really two types of integration that we can do here. There is a automated process, which is where we have connectors. So meaning you put in a request and it's approved, and it automatically gets granted because you have connectors for it. The other is a manual process where that there is no connector for it, and either it needs to go to the help desk for it to be completed, or there's got to be some other mechanism. And we will talk about this in a little bit more detail because there are two scenarios that we can provide on this use case. So this we talked a little bit about in terms of the SLA capabilities. So like I said, and we'll show this when we set it up, that you can have multiple levels of approval. And not only are they different levels of approval, you can also have a individual person who's going to be an approver, or it can be a group of people. And so there's a question that says, am I the only one that the connection cut? So it's the connection's choppy. It could be a network issue, but I think when we record it, hopefully it should be clean and should be able to play it back at that point. Okay, thanks a lot, everybody, for confirming that. It seems like it's working fine for most people. Okay. So in the multi-approver, right, we have a single and a group base. So anytime that you have more than one person who needs to approve, you can create a group in OpenIAM, put the people in that group, and the request for approval will go to everybody in that group. So somebody needs to claim that request first, and then they can start to act on it. So this way you don't have two people trying to approve this at the same time. Okay. The other part is about the SLAs. Also, the other part that we'll go over as we go through this is that there's an admin capability. So there are tools there where a admin can see the workflows which are in the system. They can cancel workflows that have been created by accident or they're not valid anymore. You can also reassign them. So we'll take a look at these tools as well. Okay. So let's start to move forward. So the first, the overall bulk of work that we need to do to get to the, to set up our workflows is that we need to first configure the catalog, and to configure the catalog, we need to define an organization structure for the catalog, and then we need to populate the catalog. And by what I mean by populate the catalog is the list of applications and the group memberships, the roles that are there, any access control rights, which are also there. Sometimes people ask if you can use this for things which are not access control related. And it wasn't designed for that, but you certainly can. So if you wanted to say, put in a request for a laptop, there's no reason why you can't. You just have to kind of organize the catalog accordingly to kind of suit your needs. And so it could be a laptop, it could be a phone, it could even be a badge that you need, right? So it can be pretty flexible in that respect, but just keep in mind that that wasn't really the sole purpose of the overall design when we created it. Okay. So let's start to kind of work through this. So when we, and I'll show you this on the interface itself, the catalog itself is organized into a series of what we would call categories or application categories. And within those categories, it's a hierarchical structure. And then you could put your applications into that, into those categories. And then within each one of those applications, we would have applications and entitlements. Okay. So let's go ahead and get out of this for a second, and let's go ahead and start to do that work. Okay. So I'm going to log in as an admin at this point, and because I'm going to be configuring a few things, and I'm going to open up the two tabs. So one is my self-service, which is where people would actually create these requests. And so first things first, for people who are new to OpenIAM, which is I think is quite a few people on the call today, where is this whole request approval functionality, right? So I go into self-service, and if I click on create a request for myself, or if I pick a user to create a request for, the next thing it says is select from service catalog. This is your path into the request approval functionality. These top level options that you see here, these are my categories. So let's say the first thing that I want to do is and these you can define yourself. So you don't have to be stuck with the categories that we introduce here. So let's go ahead and create a new category, and let's start building out from there. Okay. So we'll go back to our admin interface. And the first thing that we do is go to access control, and we go to resource. So if I filter this type list here by application category, you will see all the categories that we just created, that we just saw on that last screen. Right? So this is where they're coming from. If I want to change the title, I can just edit these. So in our case, we're going to go ahead and create a new one. Right. So first I need to, so these are resources. And remember, a couple of sessions ago, we were talking about the access control model, and resources can be really anything in OpenIAM. So you're really seeing that different types of things that we're using resources for internally anyway for access control model, right? So it's everything from a category to the applications themselves, various things, right? So, so let's go ahead and pick a, say, application category, and and we just call this demo category. And this is the place where we can localize it. So if you need to support localization, you can define the languages that you want to, and we say it's okay. And these things don't really, they're not really relevant here. We need to make it active. And these things, it should be visible. If it's not, and it should be public. If it's not, then it's not going to show up on our list. So at this point, we have created our category. So if all goes well, we should be able to if I refresh, if I just come back into the screen, so this is the demo category that we just created, right? So let's say we want to create a child category that goes with this. We want to add a little bit more nesting, maybe, especially if there are lots of applications, we may want to organize them even within the top level category structure. Okay. So we, at this point, do the same thing again. And so you get a resource. Application category, and we say, okay. And again, same thing, nothing really more to do here, except now we're going to, so now that we've created this, at this point, we really have created another top level category. So what we need to do is go back to our original one, the one that we wanted to create as a parent, and open this up. And we go to entitlements. And under child resource, we're going to do an add, and we're going to do an application category. And here we're going to say child demo category. Okay. So now we've created a relationship between these two categories. And if we were to go back to our, again, our structure here, we should see demo category, and then we see our child. So if we had many different options underneath here, we'll see a full list of categories coming up over here. Okay. So we've created now the top level, basically the structure, right? And so you'd want to customize these for your needs. I want to give a little bit of thought to kind of define how end users are going to be navigating, the application list and what's most natural for them, and use the appropriate type of naming and organization to help them get there, right? Because if you don't, it's just going to feel foreign to them. The adoption will be bad, and you won't really achieve what you're really after. Okay. So the next thing is to add an application into this, right? And there are two types of applications that we can create. We can create applications which have a connector, or applications which don't have a connector. So let's take one that we did last time. So we had a managed system, and we had created this AD PowerShell managed system, right? So we know this is already there. So if we were to open this up, you'll see down below there is a field called category. And if I pick from here, you'll see that I have my demo category and my child category now. They're both showing up over here. So if I were to, based on the category that I pick, my application is going to show up in a different place. Okay. So again, going back to self-service. Again, I know I'm going back and forth a bit, but so earlier we used to see AD PowerShell over here. But now if I go my demo category, I see my AD PowerShell connector popping up over here, right? And this is, it's a managed system configuration, which has that field for the category is where you control this. And so if you wanted to create a manual application, you would do the same thing too. We haven't really covered how to create a manual application, but it's incredibly simple. All you need to do is just this. So let's just say go to manage system and say create a new managed system, and leave out the connector part here. And you can say, need to make it active and tag it as being manual. That's it. And now pick a category, and let's say I want to put this in a demo category as well. Okay. And basically all that manual flag tells us is that it's going to have a slightly different flow when everything is done at the end. Okay, so let's go back to our self-service. Okay. We see our manual application popping up over here, right? So now the next thing is, you know, if we click on, say, for example, AD PowerShell, we'll see all the groups and everything that were already brought in, right? So this one's good. But if we go back to our manual application, it doesn't have anything that we can really pick. And one of the requirements here is that we need to have some entitlements that go with the application. It is one of it's just the way that the catalog has been kind of built, that it needs something that you need to pick. And so if you're going to use this thing for, say, buying a laptop or something like that, then the things that you pick here could be, options like your CPU, your memory, your disk, things to help you configure that. But if you have nothing that needs to be picked, then just put in a dummy group and associate it with this as a placeholder, and your flow will continue at this point. Okay. Now the other part is, like, let's say if we wanted to create a new group for our manual application. So we have this app and we want to use it, but since we don't have any entitlements, we have really can't do anything with it. Right. So let's just do something simple. Let's just go ahead and create a group. And this is going to be a general group. And you can create new types of groups if you want to, but right now it's not needed for what we need to do. So, so just say test group for, right. And here I'm going to pick, my manual app, right? The one that I just created. And that's really, I think, all I need to do here. Status is active. I don't need to link this guy to the category structure. It's implied because the application itself was placed in that category. The entitlements will appear underneath that application, so we don't need to do anything further from that perspective. Okay. So just a little validation. We go back and let's reload this thing. And at this point, we should see that group. Nope, we need to give it a second. Okay, we'll come back to this in a second. It may be something that actually caused that screen to blank out. But anyway, so let's go back to the next set of things that we need to do. Let's go back to our PowerPoint for a second. And so the next thing we need to do is to kind of work on our workflows. So this is the approval flow that we need to be able to define and how people are going to ask for something. Right? So and in that respect, we can have need to configure the workflow, and we need to configure the justification questions. Those are the two things that we need to do here. So let's go ahead and use the AD group since they're working correctly for us. Let's go ahead and go back to them. So when we are actually, so there's one thing to point out here, that there's two places where we can define the approver associations. We can define them at the application level, or we can define them at the entitlement level. So if you have a scenario where like, let's say, for example, we're using AD, and all of your AD groups are going to be approved by the requests are going to be approved by a certain flow. You can then define that approval flow at the application level. So you can go to Active Directory itself, and you can create that approval flow there. If you need more fine-grained control, then you can go to the group level and you can assign the approval flows at that level as well. Sometimes, and it's actually not it's a pretty frequent scenario, is at many customers we have a case where you have a general flow for the application, but there are some groups or some entitlements which are a little bit more sensitive. And for those, we need to have a different approval flow. So you do have the option to be able to override that top level flow at the entitlement level. And this is a good thing to keep in mind, because if you have thousands of groups, you don't want to be going into each group and setting the workflows. It's a complete waste of time. It's not a maintainable solution. So what we recommend is you define it at a top level, because it covers like 95% of your cases. And in the entitlements which you need to override, you can then put in the actual workflow that you want. Okay. And just remember, like every single entitlement object, from resources, groups, roles, they all allow you to define what the workflow is. So in this case, let's go to our application level object, right? AD, right? So again, it's a resource. So this part of the workflow, even though it's related to a managed system, we need to do this on the resource side. The resource screen doesn't allow you to do this type of configuration. So let's take our AD flow and go to approver associations. Actually, let's go back for 1 second. There's something I need to point out here. So on this AD screen, you'll notice that I filled in the resource owner, and I assigned it to a user. The user's name is, with lack of creativity, named app owner. This means that, this value that we define here, we can now use it in our workflows. So if I go to approver associations, I'm going to, at this point, let's blow these guys away. Let's build it out from scratch. So this is what you'll be coming into, that there's no workflow defined. So the first one, let's make it a supervisor. So in this case, now the next thing is, now normally you would assume that it's a supervisor, there's one supervisor, but we have a little bit more flexibility here, because some of our customers, we have a case where a person can have more than one supervisor. You can have a primary supervisor, and then you can have a dotted line into someone else, right? So we do give you the flexibility of kind of defining this. So in this case, let's say that we're going to make this the default supervisor, okay? And the next thing is we want to say, who do we want to notify on approval? So by default, it's going to notify the next person on the list of saying that you have some work to do, right? But these are things like I can define, the target user, which means the person who this request is for. I can also, define a specific person if I want to, or I can notify someone on, that this was not approved. And then over here, we have some values in terms of reminders. So I can say, I'm going to send out one reminder, and I'm going to do it after 3 days. And I'm going to do this once, right? So at this point, I save that. And it's important you need to click that save button, otherwise you will lose your work. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to go with the owner. And in the same scenario here, I'm going to save that. And now I have my workflow done. As you can see, you can have as many steps as you want. And this is a question that comes up quite a bit is, can I have multi-approver steps? And obviously the answer is yes. Now, the other part is, if the person, the approver that we pick is a group of people, right? So let's just kind of add another step here. Let's say this is a group and we, pick, somebody here, right? So that means everybody who's in this group is going to get this message, right? So somebody has to claim it at that point before they can act on it, right? So this is a way that we can send out notifications to a group of people. So let's get rid of that. So we're fine with this. So we created our workflow. Now, other thing to keep in mind is this flow that we define here, it's really kind of sensitive, which means that when the system looks for the supervisor for a user, it's going to look for a supervisor of the same type. So if somebody has only one out of the two supervisors defined and it's the wrong type, then this guy's going to fall back to the default approver that we have defined in our workflows in the administration tab. Okay, so just keep that in mind as you're kind of working through this. The second part of this is we have the supervisor. We created a user here, and the user is called Demo Manager. And if we look at the supervisors list here, well, not, okay, let's look at their direct reports. That'll give me what I want. This business user, so they've got this relationship is set here, and then we need to set the supervisor your type, right? So let's blow this away and let's add a supervisor to this user. So here's a type that we pick. And so if there's a mismatch here, that workflow is not going to fail. So we need to make sure that it says default supervisor. Okay. So now we have our association in place and it's correct. At this point, we're actually ready to do a test of our workflow to see if it actually is moving through this okay. So let's log out of our system here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as another admin, because what I want to show is I want to show these requests getting to the manager. So I can log in as the end user and I can put that request in, or I can log in as a manager and I can put that request in. So I'm going to use the option of someone else creating a request because just because it seems like it would touch on a different part of the product. Sorry, going to the wrong place. So my big option here is the request for myself. So I'm not looking to create a request for myself. I'm looking to create a request for someone else, right? And that request is this user called business user, right? And so I'm going to go to the catalog. And at this point, I'm going to, for my category, I'm going to pick my AD group. And so as I look through this, what you'll see is that there's some things which are grayed out. And these things which are grayed out are because this user already has access to this. So you can't request access for something which they already have access to. Okay. There's a question, is it possible to assign, is it possible for a role to be assigned to a catalog? I'm not sure if I completely understand the question. Is it whether you can limit access to the catalog to a certain role, or is it that you want to be able to request a role from the catalog? Sorry. Okay, so let's just take any one of these groups. Let's take a couple of these groups. Now you'll also notice that there's another a column here, which is showing up as not set. It's just max duration. Max duration refers to us being able to limit how long, how much time can someone have access to a certain certain group of role membership, right? So if there's certain if it's like say a privileged group, for example, you may want to limit that to 1 day, 2 hours, a week. Doesn't it could be some arbitrary value that makes sense for the business, and based on that, people cannot ask for access which goes beyond that point. So it basically is communicating upfront that what you can and can't do and for how long you can do it. The other thing is, so now I see my list of the two things I put in my catalog. And let's say if I wanted to ask for a certain duration. So for example, let's say I want, in days, and I really only want this for say 30 days. and I want this from, Monday. Okay. Again, save that. And the other one is just going to be open. And there's a reason for this. This is a test. Okay. And if all this looks okay, I'm going to go ahead and so I got an email notification just now that this request was created. So the question here is the modification that was done here will also replicate to 80 in terms of duration. So it's an excellent question. So it won't directly replicate into 80. And the reason I say that is because we're trying to build a solution which is kind of neutral to all target systems, right? So those target systems may not have a sense of time. Now, let me take that back. If we wanted to, with the policy mapping that we have, we can certainly push those attributes down into 80. But imagine that we're working with, say, like an Oracle database, which maybe there isn't a way to set the amount of time that somebody can have a certain role for. Well, that access is controlled in OpenIAM. So if we say that access can only be granted there for, say, 4 hours or, say, 4 days, there is a scheduled task that's going to be running in the background in OpenIAM, which is checking for expired access. And when that expiration happens, it will then revoke that access in that target system. So it is going to impose those parameters in the target system, through what OpenIAM is doing. Okay, so I got a message. Here's my, some details about the things that I asked for, the start and end dates, and so on and so forth, right? So now going back here, also, I can see my own requests. I can go to my requests, and then we'll see the requests that I've been creating. And so you'll see that this is the one that I just created just now. And if I open this up, it will show me what I'm asking for, and it also shows me who the approvers are. Okay, and then here you see that there is a time period around this, that it must be completed by the 18th, and it has a days to escalation as well. Right. So at this point, let's log in as the approver. So that is going to be our manager. Okay, so this request that we just put in, it's going to be here. I can look at it in the inbox that's here. It was also right here under my approvals. Okay, so same thing here. Now over here, I don't have to approve the full request if I don't want to. So I can accept this, which means I've approved it. I can say I only want to, I'm not going to approve that particular one, that for some reason they don't need it, right? Or, I can reject the whole thing. If I'm not the right person, I can also delegate this to someone else, right? I just pick who it is and the reason why I'm delegating this, and it will go to that, whoever I'm going to delegate this to. Okay. A couple other things to kind of note here. So I created this request as a sysadmin backup. So if I had created this request for my own direct report, and I'm the manager, then at that point, the system knows that since it's a supervisor who is the approver, it knows that it is the supervisor who has actually created the request. And because they created the request, that it's going to autocomplete. So this step, it would have skipped this first step. You would not have gotten in a notification, and it would have moved on to the second person. Right. So the workflows do have the logic built into them to know that if the requester and the approver are the same, then there's no point to have them approve what they just put in. Right. And it's just basically double work. Okay. So the question is, is our actual changes are happening in the managed system. Is that correct? Yeah. So the things that we're doing here are being propagated down into the managed system. So we're not just doing things on the OpenIAM side. This is actually touching the backend system because there's a connector for it, right? Another thing to note about the catalog also is that it has an out of office feature. So if I was away for a week, which would never happen, but if I was, I would say, delegate all my requests to someone else, and then they would get automatically routed to that person. If I had things in my inbox, I could also reroute that to that person also, and put it on their plate to be able to do the work. Now in the audit trails, all of these details would be there. So that from a compliance perspective, we do have traceability in terms of how this is being handled. Okay, so let's approve this real quick, and it moves on. And the next person to get this is going to be the application owner. So let's approve that real quick as well. And you'll see that there's lots of notifications going on in the background. So again, the app owner gets the message here. And this is our request. And now if I open this up, it's going to tell me that the supervisor completed the request, when they did it. If there were any comments here, you would see it. So you see the approval log at the bottom, which shows the processing history that's been going on. Okay. So let's approve this. And so this is done. In literally a second or two, you will see this group being created in the AD side, and the user will be able to proceed with what they need to. A couple of exceptions to that. If you had picked a future date, if it was a future date, then it won't happen until that day arrives, and then OpenIAM will create that access in the target system. So this is kind of what the question was about. Is it touching the managed system or not? Okay, let's log back out, and there are a couple other things I want to cover in this before we kind of wrap up for today. So one of the things that comes up a lot is we need to integrate with, especially the manual applications. We need to integrate. So the question was, can we look at the audit logs for the last operation? Yep. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let's go. So if we go to the log viewer, you'll see a number of actions. So you got the create request, which is coming through. And if we open this up, you'll see some details about the request itself, and what was asked, where it was created from, so on and so forth. And then with each step, you'll see different people logging in. Sorry, you'll see the demo approver, the decision that they're making, the next set of decisions, and each step, if you approve it. I think if you open this up, there should be some details here as well. Right, so you see the details of the actual request itself, which are being captured in here. Okay. So there's a I think there's a question. Is somebody raising their hand? I think just go ahead and just post the question. I'll be happy to answer it. Okay. So a couple of things that we wanted to cover is this integration with manual applications. So a lot of companies are using products like ServiceNow or other ITSM systems, which are like say Remedy, Freshservice, where they need to integrate these requests to. So we need to kind of send these requests over into like the help desk. So imagine there's a case where we have a new hire, and we need to send the help desk a notification that they need to go and create, get a laptop ready for them. Or if there's an application where we don't have a connector for it, it's a custom app, we need to do that. So in this case, what we can do is we can kind of trick the workflows a little bit. So there's two ways we can modify the workflow underneath and tell it to send a message into ServiceNow, or we can do kind of a quick, easy approach, which is that let's take our resource. What I would do is I would just create a user in OpenIAM, which is called, say, ServiceNow, give them a mailbox. And what you do is you just go to your approver associations. And on this last step, say on approval, you pick the user and then you put in that user's name, right? And it will then look at the email address of that dummy user that you created, and it will send a message into that mailbox. Okay. So this is an easy way of doing it. If you need to customize the email templates and things like that, then you can either try to do it in a generic way, or you can modify the workflows underneath to kind of do what you need to do. Right. So a couple of different ways that we can do that. The other thing is we kind of talked a little bit about being able to administer these things from a self-service perspective. So let's go back into self-service. And there's a couple of options here for a admin or an authorized user. So under request approval, so basically any user can see all of their approvals and their request history. So things that they have asked for. So things that I've done, process, whatever. So things which are in progress, which would be my approvals. Request history are things which have been completed, and I can see all of them which this user has done. Okay. So in this case, the sysadmin user hasn't really been involved in any of these, so they can't see them. But the request administration allows you to see all the workflows which are there in flight at this point, and you can do something about them. So let's say that this particular request, so I can open this up and take a look at it. I can see the details here. I can cancel this request from here if I want to. I can delegate this again as an admin, or I think I can pick a bunch of these, and I can cancel them, or I can delegate them here as well. Okay. So, these are tools that come in handy in terms of like a maintenance perspective as we're kind of working through these things. Okay. But in terms of workflows, and request approval, this is what we had kind of planned for today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. If not, we'll see you next time when we talk about access certification. And if there's questions that come up afterwards, you just drop us a note, or if you recommend suggestions for things that we can do in the future, by all means, you can do that too. There's a question is, where can I find the recordings? There's a playlist on YouTube under the OpenIAM channel where these are posted, but there should be an email notification that goes out after this session as well, which will have that link in it, and you can find them all there. And we'll be posting this up probably like by tomorrow. It should be added to that list.